Hi, it's Dennis Daly. Decades ago, when I had the chance to talk to a sleep specialist on my radio show, I jumped at that chance because a year prior I had had terrible sleep problems. I was put in touch with a man named Jack Brunk, the director of the Sleep Diagnostics Center in Agora Hills, California. Sleep Diagnostics goes out to your home, believe it or not, and very quietly monitors what's happening. Of course, with your permission, they don't break in the middle of the night. Jack's offices are in a very quiet medical center area down a rather dark hallway. It was rather restful before I even got there.
Yeah, we picked the area because, number one, this is our corporate office, and our corporate office mainly does everyday operations, scheduling of the patients, and the scoring of the data. And the scoring of the sleep information is probably the most important part of our job, is to really make sure that the data that we collect is scored and interpreted under the most under the best guidelines as possible.
If you don't mind, I'd like to give you some of the things that have happened to me during the past year. I've been very open with my listeners over the years about, I broke my leg a couple of years ago. I did a couple of shows on that. I like to work from things that have happened to me. Just about a year ago at this time, I was in a complete panic. I was given a shift that started roughly at midnight and ended at 8 in the morning. And I thought, no problem. It was kind of a plum shift in which the last 2 hours I did our morning newscast. And it was a feather in my cap. I had very often worked till 4 in the morning, 5:30 sometimes, and I thought, well, working till 8 wasn't going to be a problem. I found out, at least for my rhythms, getting off at 8 is about 6 hours farther down the clock than getting off at 5. The sun has come up. It's not just like staying up late and going to bed. It's like waiting till tomorrow gets here. I got to the point where I was almost a zombie. I was sleeping 2 or 3 hours one day, 16 the next day. And what I want to bring up is the feeling I had about it was one of genuine panic, that I felt that I was really out of control of myself. How often do people's sleep problems get to the point where they're not maybe suicidal about it, but they feel that their life is just going downhill very quickly?
Well, it happens all the time. And what happens is for the most part, consumers are very uneducated about really what sleep is and the direct effects of not getting enough sleep is. This society is very sleep deprived, and people are used to having the feeling of being tired and not knowing how to fix that, or even if it's a problem. People who've told me after they've had their problems fixed that, my God, I've walked around 25 years feeling tired. I thought this was normal. So it happens all the time. It's very, very, very common to have people who become at the end of their ropes. Just to give you an example, we just had a lady call us no more than 15 minutes ago whose husband is at the end of his ropes because his sleep is all out of whack. And the question was, how long has this been going on? It's been going on for years. So I think it's just a slow, gradual buildup as to putting up with the problem, and then it becomes so frustrating at the end that, I'm going to do anything I can to get it fixed. What is there to do?
Aren't there people who really can't get away with less than what society perceives as being the norm?
Without question. A typical average sleep hour ranges for everybody's different. There's no people can get by with 5. There's people who need 10. The average typical sleep is anywhere between 6.5 and 9 hours of sleep, and now that's not abnormal to need that much.
So my long hours, I'm on the high end the other way, but there's nothing wrong with me needing 10 hours a night.
Absolutely not.
How common is it to have people on the edges of that graph? I mean, you surprised me when you said some people can get by with 5.
It's probably not as common. I would probably say, if you were going to divide it out into a percentage range, probably the patients that we come across sleep hours wise, maybe 10 to 15% need between 5 and 6. You get a big range of people between 6 and 8. Probably another 30-40%, and then you get 20 to 30% that need between 8 and 10 hours of sleep.
What about the whole siesta concept? I've always thought what the Mexicans did, where they would sit out with their sombreros in the afternoon after lunch, was a really good idea. Do you get into the whole aspect of actually cutting the 24-hour sleep cycle up into shorter periods? Are there people who need that afternoon nap? They say Harry Truman used to.
Well, without question, there's many patients or many people across the world. The United States is one of the only few countries that really does not have this midday break, where basically if you go to Europe or you go to Spain, Mexico, everything shuts down between hours of 2 and 4 o'clock, where people just lay down and take a nap. And there have been studies that show people are healthier when they do have a daytime nap.
Jack, let's go through some of the things you see in your studies and what people have told you. I know we can't get into names or specific diagnoses here, but the person who walks through the door at this facility, what is the most common thing you first hear from people, other than the fact I can't sleep? I mean, what is the most common pattern that these people fall into?
The most common pattern is the complaint of being excessively tired during the day. That if they're driving or they're watching TV, anything that does not have to do with all-consuming activity at this, at that point in their daily activities, if they were to sit down and read a book or to sit down and watch TV or drive a car, they become excessively tired. They have a very, very large feeling that, oh my gosh, I need to sleep. I'm that tired.
I think there's really nothing worse than having to give every ounce of concentration you have in some situations to staying awake. I find it embarrassing. I mean, there have been times I've done interviews with people, even if it's an interesting interview, that I almost get embarrassed because I realize that if I don't really concentrate, I'm going to nod off during this. And even if you take away the danger that a person driving a car has, it can be embarrassing.
Without question. And at Sleep Diagnostics, the probably 90 to 95% of all of our patients that come in have that complaint, and the complaint of very loud snoring and pauses in their breathing. And like I said, 90 to 95% of our patients are always diagnosed with some degree of that problem.
It's interesting you talk about snoring. About 5 years ago, I started waking myself up snoring. I don't know whether I'm still snoring and I'm used to it, or whether the little talk I had with myself telling me, don't do that, worked.
Well, probably you still are. If you don't have a bed partner, about the only way to really find out that if you are, the easiest thing to do is to take a tape recorder,
of which I have a few,
and tape it and see. And what that tape recorder will tell you is, am I snoring? Am I snoring rhythmically, meaning am I snoring each, and you don't hear like there's a continuous same amount of time in between each snore? Because what happens is typically people who snore, they have a higher incidence of what's called obstructive sleep apnea. And what that is that's where the airway during sleep closes off. No airflow moves in or out of the lungs. The person's trying to breathe, but while they're asleep, the air has stopped. Oxygen levels will drop in the blood, and their brain, it will send a signal to their brain saying, listen, you need to wake up and breathe. And that's when you've heard people make this loud gasping sound at the end of a pause where you haven't heard anything. And what that is that's what's called an apnea event. And it means where people have held their breaths for longer than 10 seconds.
I wanted to talk more about sleep apnea. Jack had mentioned that sometimes people stop breathing for a period of time, as long as 10 seconds, for example, and I wondered if it was possible in your sleep to simply suffocate that way.
Yes, you can.
So there are people we say people die in their sleep. They have really stopped, or they've obstructed, this syndrome has obstructed their breathing.
Right. The newest information that was just released last month from the American Sleep Disorders Association states that approximately 40,000 people a year die in the middle of the night due to obstructive sleep apnea, and that's staggering. I mean, that's a staggering amount of people that end up, dying in their sleep because they've stopped breathing.
I guess I would be remiss here if I did not then ask, are there certain symptoms related to snoring that should cause concern for people?
Yes, there are. The most common symptom is like I said, loud snoring. People who have who habitually snore tend to have a much higher incidence of sleep apnea. Another symptom is, like I said before, daytime sleepiness. Not feeling rested during the day. Somebody who has sleep apnea typically could sleep 10 hours and be awakened 400 or 500 times a night because of this event, like I just explained, where the person would stop breathing. The brain says, breathe, and wake up and breathe. But it only happens for a split second. The brain says, wake up and breathe. The person makes a loud gasp. They breathe 4 or 5 times. Their oxygen levels come back up, and then they go back to sleep again. And this keeps happening in a repetitive fashion, and it happens throughout the night. So when they wake up in the morning, their sleep is very fragmented. And they'll wake up and they'll say, gosh, I've been in bed 10 hours, but I didn't feel like I slept very well.
Yeah, I have read that people who have night terrors, they're called, which are, I guess, extreme nightmares,
yes,
can be more tired after they wake up than when they went to bed.
It all relates to the amount of how much sleep has been fragmented. And night terrors is a great case because what happens is the body is such a complex machine that when it gets into REM sleep, which night terrors are, when a person's dream and basically our bodies are paralyzed when we're asleep, that's a very traumatic effect on the body. So the body learns not to go into REM sleep because it doesn't want to go through that traumatic event. Same way as obstructive sleep apnea. People who have obstructive sleep apnea tend to have it worse in dream sleep because our muscles are paralyzed. So what happens is the body says, listen, I'm not going to have REM sleep because I don't like it. So, that's basically what it was telling itself. So the body is such a complex organism that it learns to adapt, and it configures itself to where it won't get into the part of sleep that really harms it.
Here at Sleep Diagnostics, I know you've seen a lot of people walk in with problems. How common is that feeling I was having? And you said a woman called about her husband today. How common is it that people's sleep just gets so bad and so unproductive that they really just, as I say, I wasn't quite suicidal, but I can only remember a few times in my life when I really felt as out of control with myself. I was getting scared.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's far too common. And as daily now, you're starting to see things on different national publications, a TV, radio, newspaper. As more and more information comes out, we're finding out that the numbers of people that are affected by sleep disorders now is to a staggering amount of people. You're talking probably the last numbers I've seen recently are 150 million people, and that's incredible, and that's adults and children.
Let's go through some basic things here, and then I want to talk about how your group got started, how you're expanding now into other parts of the country, not just here in the Los Angeles area. A person who has been having problems, not to put words in your mouth, but one of the things I suddenly realized, and it took me 40 years to realize this, is that because I have a digestive problem, I was waking up in the middle of the night to take an antacid. And that I was actually depriving myself sleep by eating the wrong things in those 7 or 8 hours. And you hear people say, oh, you had a nightmare, it must have been something you ate. Well, I believe a little bit in that. But in my case, one of the things I was able to fix was to make sure that most nights I don't have anything really greasy to try to digest, so that I don't have a pain all of a sudden and have to walk up and get an Alka-Seltzer.
Right. There is quite a few common disorders that food and metabolism can affect different sleep states, just like there is with drinks, with alcohol, with over-the-counter drugs. Everything you take in your daily grind can affect your sleep state.
I wanted to talk to Jack Brunk about other reasons why people can't sleep, and he brought up something that has been a problem with me for a long time.
There's a common problem called esophageal reflux, and that's where people who lay down at night, they may eat greasy foods, like you say. What happens is I
used to have that about once a week, and without going into strong detail for people, much of what is supposed to stay in your stomach doesn't, and it's not uncommon you wake up choking, or remember how 7-Up used to come out your nose? When that happens with undigested grease, you're up for about an hour trying to get yourself back to normal.
Because you've you've acutely injured the acid. It can acutely injure the lungs, mm-hmm. and that's what wakes you up, and that's what we call a big arousal. that's a big arousal where it really just fragments your sleep, probably almost pretty much for the rest of the night. It's hard to get then back to sleep because of that. So, and that's quite common, and then it's easily treatable with medication.
How many hours back from the time you're going to bed, if you find that digestive problems are hindering your sleep, should you not eat? Are we talking about 5-6 hours, a long time?
There's not a hard and fast rule as to how many hours, but what we have found and what I've seen research-wise, 4 hours is a good amount of time between between your dinner meal and bedtime. And there's a couple of reasons why. Because what happens is, as you eat closer to the time you go to bed, your body then works differently as it shuts down, and if there's food in your stomach, it still wants to burn. It still wants to have the same metabolic rate. So sometimes, I'm sure, after you've eaten a big meal and you've come home and you want to unwind because you've got to get up the next morning, it's very difficult because your body is in the digestive mode. And so your blood has been shunted to your stomach and to your intestines, and it's hard to really then fall asleep. So 4 hours is what we suggest to people to try to keep the time difference between dinner and when they go to bed.
In just what you've seen here, it would seem that, and you take this for granted now because of your area of expertise, but that sleep itself is an immensely complicated process.
It's as I was going to school and learning about it, and still we know so little today. What we've learned, sleep is a fairly new field. It's been around about 25 years. I mean, we've been sleeping obviously for hundreds of thousands of years, but in the last 25 years we've started to learn really what sleep is. I mean, we still don't know to this day why we sleep. I mean, we all know. I mean, we know, the three of us know, that if we were to shut the door in here and lock us and leave us food and drinks and all of sooner or later our eyes are going to shut to the point to where we're going to fall asleep. But we still don't know today what even triggers that and why.
And there's nothing worse, and I had this happen last year, of lying in bed thinking about the process of going to sleep. Because the more you monitor that, the more your brain doesn't let you sleep. A friend of mine gave me some good advice. He said, because I'm in broadcasting, I have clocks all over the place. He said, fix your clocks so you cannot see them from the bed. So you take away that constant checking you have and the guilt feelings you have. Try to sleep unfettered by the clock, if you will.
Without question, that's one of the real common problems, especially in people who have insomnia. You hear people say, well, gosh, I know I've got to get up at 5 a.m. It's 10 o'clock. I know I'm only going to get 7 hours of sleep. The one thing you want to do when you go to bed is try not to psychoanalyze sleep itself. Go to bed when you're tired, close your eyes, and just let it happen. And the clocks are one of the worst things in the world, because I'll talk to people, I'll say, do you look at your clock when you sleep? Yes, when I wake up, I look at it to see what time it is. Turn it around, and do not look at it, because they'll then, and what happens is people find themselves, and one of my next questions I'll always ask people is, do you find yourself waking up at the same time? And they'll say, well, yeah, I look about 1:30 every morning. It's because you have trained your body to look at the clock and to now wake up. The body is such a phenomenal system that you're teaching it every night by looking at the clock.
How does the body know what time it is? I mean, I've had occasions, and I'm sure we all have, where I've had an appointment and forgot to set the alarm, and it's a weird time. It's not when I normally wake up. And instinctively, I will go ahead and wake up and think, my Lord, thank goodness I woke up.
We all have internal body clocks, and that clock is called a circadian rhythm. The body has a 24-hour alarm clock, and it's broken down into two 12-hour periods. And that was one of the problems you were having when you were on night shift, is because your circadian rhythms were affected by the change in your hours. And what happens is typically every 12 hours we'll have the time during the day. During the day, we'll take an example for during the day first. Typically between 2 or 4 o'clock, your body will lower its body temperature. And during that time, if you were to lay down, it gets back to the siesta. Mm-hmm. They were able to, back many hundreds of years ago, people figured out that there was a time in which you were tired during the day, you laid down and you went to sleep. The body has that window of opportunity when the body temperature drops, and it will go to sleep during the day. Whereas in the middle of the night, around 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning, I bet you've probably woken up during that time and you have found it difficult to go back to sleep. Well, it works just the opposite way, that the circadian rhythm during that time, your body temperature increases, and if you wake up, you might find it difficult to go back to sleep. So the body is in sync on every 12-hour system.
You mentioned the body temperature lowers. Is that why I've always liked to sleep in a colder room? I've always been an advocate of having it too cool, but putting on as many covers as I need.
Absolutely, yeah, because the body starts to shut down its metabolic rate. So what happens is typically if you're running, the body works on every second it's burning a certain amount of calories to maintain the heat and maintain its its biological rhythm. When we go into a sleep state, it shuts down, or it turns itself down. It winds back down. It may be only working at 20 to 30% of what it normally does. So as that happens, your body will feel colder because of the less burning of heat.
Now that I think about it, Ben Franklin, his advice for people who couldn't sleep was to get up, take off as much clothes as you can, wait till you got cold, and then go back to bed.
Yeah, well, that was a long time ago. There's no scientific data to support that, but it gets back to the fact I've heard some crazy concoctions in this business as to what will help people sleep, and whatever helps you sleep, that's what you need to do.
What is the average amount of time it takes for a person to go to sleep? And on the extreme end, how quickly can people sleep? I mean, I had a college roommate who, I thought he was kidding me at first. He would literally be near the end of a sentence as we were lying, talking at night, and fall asleep. Yeah, it would just take a minute or less.
That's a great question. Typically, and that's really how in our business, that's how we monitor truly how tired somebody is. A typical person, when they go to bed, should take between 15 and 20 minutes to fall asleep. Now, if we find somebody, and what we do is we monitor that from the time the lights go out. If we find that somebody falls asleep in less than 5 minutes, that's a sign that pathologically they are excessively sleepy, and there is something causing them to go to sleep. You should not fall asleep that fast.
My average is 2 minutes.
Well, then that means that you're not getting enough sleep. Okay, now there's different reasons why you're not getting enough sleep. Typically, in this day and age, a reason for falling asleep so quickly is that you may only be able, because of the 24-hour day, and God, I wish it was a 36-hour day most days, you don't have enough time to lay down and really get enough true sleep hours. It goes back to what we were talking about. People need 6 to 8 hours or 6 to 10 hours of sleep. If you need 8 hours and you're only getting 6, well then as soon as your body lays down, it's going to go right out and go to sleep. Whereas if you need longer, you're going to be more excessively tired.
Now, I have something Pavlovian here, though. Since childhood, I've had an extremely loud fan in my bedroom. When I lived in Washington, D.C. for 20 years, it masks the noise. I was in the flight path of National Airport.
Right.
Here in Los Angeles, since I'm on the opposite side of the room from the air conditioner, I actually have a microphone in the air conditioner and a speaker under the back of my bed. And when I turn on that roar, am I giving you an idea here? When I turn on that roar, to me, I've always thought the reason most nights I fell asleep quickly, it's like Pavlov's dog. It's like the bell ringing, the dog salivates. I turn the fan on, I fall asleep. And if the lights go out and the fan stops, I wake up.
It's because you've taught yourself that way.
And I have a heck of a time in a motel room where it's quiet.
Yeah, and typically that's a huge problem. People get themselves trained in exactly what it is, Pavlov's dog. It's like I said, the clock. People have programmed themselves to look at that clock, and they wake up by that clock. So there's many people who cannot fall asleep unless the TV is running. Mm-hmm. Many people who can't fall asleep unless the stereo is on. And that's just because that's how you've taught your body to sleep over many years. And it's very difficult to withdraw yourself from that because of your psychological status. Your body's not going to let itself get into a normal state. I mean, that's how you've trained yourself to sleep.
Your company is here in Ventura County, which for those people outside of Los Angeles is essentially Los Angeles.
Right.
You're in the midst of reaching out, starting new offices. From what I take it, not just from your company, but in the research at large, this whole area of sleep diagnostics is a burgeoning field now.
Yeah, without question. It's always been, for the last 25 years, it's been basically a research hospital-type setting. people had to come to the clinic to be tested. Within the last 5 years, the new technology has allowed us basically to go test patients where they sleep the best. I mean, you just made a comment, you go to a hotel room, you don't sleep very well. Well, what we want to do, sleep diagnostics was built on the fact, I've been in sleep personally for 12 years. I've ran
You've been not asleep, you've been in sleep.
No, I've been in sleep for 12 years. I have a master's back in neurobiology, and I've ran large sleep lab departments, and I started this business based on the fact that I felt that people, if they're going to demonstrate a problem, they're going to demonstrate it really where they demonstrate it every night, and that's in their own bed. And that's, for us, is what our cornerstone of our business is built on, is going to the patient's home and providing a complete sleep study in the patient's home where they sleep every night.
You know, I've always wondered about that because I've seen sleep studies on television done in hospitals, and I thought, well, that's such a hostile environment. It's not your mattress. It's not the sounds at your house. It would seem doing it outside of a person's bed would be really an unnatural reading and an additional burden on them.
Without question. And there's been studies to show that people sleep. I mean, we've taken, and when I say we, the industry itself has taken patients and slept them in a sleep center one night, and then immediately the next night brought them into their own home, and basically all the sleep information was altered more to the severe state of the problem. So a person who said that they snored and stopped breathing demonstrated more of that at home than they did in the lab. So we're actually able to take and get a truer picture of how a person sleeps in home versus than when they have to come to a clinic.
Jack, let's take about 60 seconds here. Explain, I guess you have to be hooked up to some kind of monitoring system. How elaborate is that? Is it encumbering for the person? What do you do when you go out to a person's house?
Right. Well, what we do is we monitor 18 different channels of data. And when I say channels, I mean channels of information that, when it fed into a computer system and we're able to analyze it, tells us everything we need to know about a person's night's sleep. And that's everything from, we monitor brain activity. The brain activity tells us when somebody falls asleep, what type of sleep they're in, and we're able to then document that. We also monitor chin movement for muscle activity, because when we're in REM sleep, our bodies are paralyzed. There's no muscle tone. And we monitor eye movement, because when we're in REM sleep again, our eyes are flickering, called rapid eye movement. REM stands for rapid eye movement sleep. And that's this type of sleep we all need to be able to take in our daily activities. It's kind of like a computer system. It's like our RAM in our computer system. It's where we take in the knowledge and then we download it to the hard drive, basically. We monitor heart rate. We look at the cardiovascular response to a patient's problem. If they're having a lot of stoppage of their breathing at night, a lot of sleep apnea, we look at what the heart does, because there's a tremendous burden on the heart. We also look at leg activity. 20 to 30% of the population are affected by what's called restless leg syndrome. And that's where legs jerk and kick, and it wakes the person up. And they may not realize they wake up, but it fragments their sleep, and it makes them very sleepy during the day.
I wanted to ask Jack about something that affects an awful lot of people, whether you work in a factory or in broadcasting. What about a person doing shift work? I had a terrible time about a year ago. I was doing morning newscasts, having to stay up till 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and thought I was going to die. I mean, everything wrong happened. I was in a genuine panic. There are people, because they're in a plant or a factory, who have to choose between not having a job and going into work at midnight. What do you tell shift workers?
What we try to do is we try to tell them that they need to program their body to try to fool their circadian rhythm. And the question is, how do you do that? Well, what you do is this. When you're working at night, if you have an availability of bright lights, there's a therapy available called bright light therapy. And every couple of hours you should be able to have this bright light that will basically go in, and the light is, you look at it with your eyes, and it's like a hood. And what it does is it fools your body into thinking that it's daytime. And then when you go home in the morning and you get off, sleep in a very dark room or even with dark shades, and what that does is that fools the body into thinking that it's night. And when you're off of work, try to stay into that routine. I know it's hard for people, because I used to work nights myself. I used to work 12-hour shifts and be off 4 days, and it was very difficult in trying to stay on nights when you have a family and you're trying to work days and nights. So what we try to do during that time is fool the clock into thinking that when you're working it's day and when you're sleeping it's night.
And I guess the bottom line is, since people are so prone to be judgmental, and they'll say, oh, you're drinking too much caffeine, or you don't need 11 hours sleep, isn't the thing to do to really say, hey, this is my body, I'm going to see a doctor, I'm going to see a health professional, someone in sleep diagnostics, because the average person doesn't know about this. I mean, it's a very difficult area to get into.
Right. You should have no ego when it comes to your health, especially when it comes to a sleep disorder, because sleep is nature's cure-all for our everyday living. I mean, when we go to sleep at night, our bodies release chemicals that allows our muscles to be repaired from the walking that we do. Everything we do revolves around sleep. Our immune systems. People who are not healthy do not sleep well. And it all correlates to our nature's gift. I mean, sleep is a gift, and we all do it, and we all need to cherish it, and it will make us live longer and happier. And for people that have not had that feeling for many years, they don't know what it is, and then we restore it. I mean, that's part of it's part of the gratitude that I get from being able to treat people and be able to have people call me back and say, my God, you've saved my life. And literally those people are thinking that this is a life savings because their life has changed that much.
Jack, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Almost too much information to sink in. Makes me tired. I think I'll go to bed. I'm Dennis Daly.